Sorry about the glitches in the audio there. Before we go to questions, I just want to note, candidates, it really doesn't matter which microphone you use. If one of those is better for your height, you can go to that one. That's fine. It doesn't have to be the one that's in front. So, as I said, we had a number of questions that came in online before we actually even held the forum, and as you might guess, one of those had to do with spraying for mosquitoes. Emily Demorest, you will take this question first, and it asks, do you believe in spraying for mosquitoes as recommended by scientists with the MDHHS, which would be the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services? Emily, you're first.
This is a great first question. I like a question that you haven't had to answer before, so I appreciate this one. So I think the biggest issue people had with the plan to spray was that there was very little time for public education, public comment, and I think people have, it's understandable how people are skeptical of this plan, right? There have been times in the past where our environment has been harmed inadvertently by actions that are taken through pesticides and different things that we don't think is going to be problematic, and it is. So I think those concerns are legitimate. From a financial standpoint, it really seems like sort of an overkill to me. I understand a few people had been very ill, a few people died, but the actual statistical chance of contracting and getting very sick and ill and dying from EEE was minuscule compared to the cost of the operation that was put underway.
Thank you. Chris Pradle, the same question. Do you support spraying for mosquitoes as recommended by scientists with MDHHS?
But probably like a lot of you, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this issue, and in fact, when I was knocking doors recently, this was a hot topic issue even before the spray was announced. I think for me, the thing that is most alarming perhaps is all the vulnerabilities that were exposed in the last week in terms of how we react to what perceived as a crisis in our community, in our region, right? So we start off on Friday, people start chattering and hearing the word that they have 5 hours to make the decision and educate themselves about whether or not they can opt themselves out or not. Number one. That's scary in itself. What if somebody was tied up in a meeting? What if somebody wasn't, on the computer at that time period? Number two, the next day we find out that there's a lot of outrage about this, rightfully so, that people are concerned. Before we get over the weekend, we find out that people are, that it's opted out in the city, that we've opted out in Portage, now it's opted out in the county. All these things have changed, and I think it's important that our city look at this as an example and come back together afterwards to figure out how we address and decide on these things in the future. So in the future that we can get everybody involved and their input provided as well.
Benjamin Stanley, the same question. Do you support spraying for mosquitoes as recommended by scientists with MDHHS?
So I've been house sitting for somebody out in the middle of the woods. There's lots of mosquitoes. And I haven't heard a lot about the outbreak. I've heard a little bit. I do agree that it was very poor communication about what the pesticide was and how it would affect people and animals. So I think that could be improved on. But from what I've heard, Kalamazoo is the only place that's opted out. Again, I haven't heard everything. But if that's true, that goes to show that Kalamazoo is a pretty unifying city. It's amazing what people can do here. I like that Kalamazoo has that community and that they let their voices be heard, and I would like to see that continue. Thank you.
Jeanne Hess, same question on spraying for mosquitoes.
I must admit, when I first heard that this was going to go on, I was concerned. I didn't know. We didn't know. And again, as I've been knocking doors as well, there is legitimate concern by the people of this community. I think it exposes a larger issue in our community of how we disseminate information and actually how we deal with fear of either the mosquitoes or the spraying. How do we deal with the fear? because fear is a powerful motivator. I think we break down the fear by dialogue and by asking questions and having increased communication avenues, which I don't know what those are, whether it's a common app for the city of Kalamazoo. How do we reach all the people of the city of Kalamazoo? I agree with the science, but I also agree that we need to stop. Thank you.
Jacob Andrews, same question.
All right, so to keep it as simple as possible, my campaign, and as your next city commissioner, I will always stand with scientists and I will always stand with experts. My campaign is built around the idea that we have every solution we need already within the community. We have experts dedicated to making Kalamazoo a better place, and if we just bring those heads and minds together, we can do a lot of great things. But there is no doubt that communication on the spraying could have used some work. Like Chris said, we were given 5 to 6 hours notice on whether or not to opt out. I tend to think I'm a pretty engaged person, and I never saw any sort of information about how this would protect bees, how this would protect kids, humans. I just never saw any of it. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to look to use this as an example for when fear is coming up in the future with the climate crisis and everything else going on. This is going to happen again, so we need to make sure we're handling it in a more appropriate manner.
Pete Kushner, same question. Do you support spraying for mosquitoes?
I think this issue boils down to education and communication. One of the main reasons I'm running for city commission is I've seen in my 9 years as president of our neighborhood association the lack of two-way communication between our government and our residents, whether it's through our neighborhood association, whether it's individual residents or the businesses in our neighborhood. I agree that the spraying is going to kill mosquitoes. But when it comes to issues such as this, that are large and important for our community, there needs to be two-way communication, there needs to be a voice where our residents are heard on these issues. I heard everything when I first posted this on our Facebook page, it just blew up. Everybody's worried, from the bees to their kids to what happens if we don't spray. So I think what it boils down to is communication, letting people know, but letting our residents have a voice in this.
Thank you. Patrese Griffin, same question. Do you support spraying for mosquitoes?
So to answer your question directly, I'm not opposed to spraying. I supported the mayor's decision as a commissioner to ask that there not be any aerial spraying, and because we didn't have the information. But what happened is the county health department trumps the city, they trump the city government. So what happened is, once everyone found out, it's the same time that the rest of us found out. And the unfortunate part is that we were left out of the decision-making process. As commissioners, we still live here. We're just like everyone else. And so what happened is, it was put out there, no one had time to figure out what was going on. Language barriers were not being addressed. And so as a community, we were given the opportunity to lift our voices up and opt out, and that's what happened. Now moving forward, I'm very interested in finding out if there's a way to do a local spray, maybe by backpack, or maybe by truck, because for the person whose child is sick and dying, and the people who have died, I can't ignore their concerns, and so there's got to be a better way to address both sides.